All right, and we are now officially live. So, of course, I'm here, everybody, today with Richard Chizmar. Great news as well. You just mentioned that you're taking some time away from the sequel to Boogeyman to jump in here and talk about just over my shoulder here called Stephen King's It. It's an incredible and insane journey that you decided to embark on with starting with reading all the books Stephen King ever wrote in order of publication, right up until I guess your head explodes on. When did you start thinking it was a good idea to, not only reread all of Stephen King's books in order, but to chronicle your journey along the way?
You know what? To answer that question, I wish I had pulled the original email that I had written to Steve because when I sent him that email saying, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing this," that was precisely the same day that the idea came. I didn't really let it. I didn't really let the idea marinate or anything like that. And and what the catalyst was is I reread one of the older books, and I don't remember now which one it was, but it was one of the earlier Doubleday books. And then the idea kind of occurred to me. I'm like, wow, it'd be interesting to start at the beginning and kind of, like stepping into a time machine and being one of those folks who read Steve from the very beginning and experienced his books in order, because I've always envied those readers. So that's kind of where the idea came from. And I expected Steve to talk me out of it. And he did think I was crazy, but at the same time was really encouraging. And was like, yeah, you should write about it. So yeah, that's where the idea came from. So what we did is Brian Freeman and Kate Freeman helped me develop this website where we posted it, and and it was linked up with the Cemetery Dance website, and it was a lot of fun. And we got a lot of viewers, a lot of readers. And then just the world, I just got so busy, and there was a long delay. And God bless Bev Vince, Bev always had his accompanying historical essays ready, before mine. Sometimes days, sometimes weeks. He'd probably poke his head in right now and say sometimes months. But yeah, I'll address the elephant in the room for anyone who knows about Stephen Revisited. This is volume 1, and it covers the first 19 books. And I haven't updated it for years, but yeah, one day I will return. I might have to be a little older and grayer, when my schedule allows. But it's interesting. When I started writing these essays, and when I finished writing these essays, Gwendy's Button Box and the idea of me collaborating with Steve were not even a piece of dust, floating through the air.
Right.
It's not a possibility. It was nothing, so the idea that one day I might write an essay saying, hey, I was reading this Stephen King book when Steve and I decided to collaborate, will be interesting. That'll be a fun essay. So yeah, way behind, but I had a blast doing these essays. I had a blast going back and kind of reading them again in order, to have them ready for the book. And I purposely tried my darndest to not change much, to kind of leave all the warts there, because they're really personal essays. They're not meant to be, Bev did the more historical, academic approach, which he's wonderful at. Actually, he's wonderful at everything. He's a really good writer. And mine were very much just personal, remembrances. So yeah, it's been fun from the beginning.
Cool. Yeah, and it's interesting, that you mentioned the word personal, because I think that, obviously you took a whole host of special guest accomplices as well in your crazy idea of doing all of this. And what blew me away is how personal of an experience it was for each and every one of them to reread the King books, and then, of course, discuss their own impact on their life at that time, looking back on it all. Did you already know who it was you wanted to personally invite along for the ride? Did you put out sort of a mass shout out saying, who wants to come on board, bring me your best, and I'll pick my favorites? How did that collaboration come along with the guest that also?
Yeah, in some cases I knew exactly who I wanted to ask. And there were, personal reasons for that I already knew. I knew I wanted to ask Josh Boone to write about the Stand because it had such a huge impact on his life. And there were several cases like that. But I'll tell you, once I started doing this, people came out of the woodwork, emailing me, texting me, asking if they could do this book, if they could do that book. And that's one of the reasons that I really do want to continue this in the future, is because so many people have volunteered to write pieces to accompany specific books. So yeah. I mean, they, the interesting thing is the idea of doing that, it was kind of twofold. It was, first and foremost, it was me saying, I don't want to just be me and Bev. As interesting as Bev is, this will get boring after a while. But the other thing is I really wanted to, I enjoy those essays very much. Underwood Miller did a collection of essays about specific Stephen King books or aspects of his writing. I can't remember the title of the book, but yeah, I think it was Bare Bones, actually, or no, that might have been Interviews, but yeah. So I really wanted to, that was a case where I really wanted to read these things myself, these accompanying pieces. So it was a pleasure to ask these guys.
But then going through to see what those books meant to each of those special guests that you brought on along with you, like what did that mean to you to see how those same books meant so much to you and seeing what they meant to your individual colleagues and friends?
What it really shone a spotlight on, a bright spotlight, was the idea that Stephen King didn't become Stephen King just because he's an entertaining writer. He's a once in a lifetime phenomena. His books and the connection that readers feel to them, these constant readers. You can pick up a good thriller or a good horror novel or a good mystery or pretty much anything and enjoy it for a couple of days, and then you put it down and you walk away. And there's no, did you get your money's worth? Yes. Was it completely enjoyable? Yes. Will you remember it 2 months down the road? Probably not. There's a lot of books like that. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Sure.
That is, what? It's just like you go and you pay your however much, $12 or whatever for a movie ticket. You sit in the theater, you watch it for 2 hours, you eat some popcorn, you come out. If you're satisfied, you got your money's worth. That's awesome. That's the deal. That's what you pay for. Same thing with the book.
Right.
But to become this mega, literary star the way Stephen King has, there's got to be more. And what all these other people had to say just reinforced that for me, because they, like you said, a lot of them echoed my own thoughts, sometimes in different ways, sometimes in very similar ways. And there was such a personal connection. There was such an emotional connection. In some cases there was a sense of awe. In some cases there was a sense of such deep emotion that it brought tears or anger. And that's the key. That's the secret for Steve's success, is that you have all these people from a variety of places and a variety of backgrounds who all had this shared experience because of his work. And that's pretty damn neat.
100%. I couldn't have said it better myself. And I'm kind of biting my tongue a little bit because I do want to reference some of the individual essays and connect them back, of course, to their prospective writers that did those essays. But I think I'd be doing them and mention one and not every single one of them. And we were talking all day, but it was incredible how some of them wrote. Really, some of the guests wrote from a place of sadness, a place of loss, a place of anger, and that Stephen King very much shared that same space with them and wrote about it just absolutely brilliantly, where they're not alone. And he also wrote for the bigger picture, but also included all of the individual people within that picture, which is pretty awesome. And you kind of mentioned Bev as well, which I'm really glad you did, because go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's actually a really good point, because what's interesting and another reason why I decided to write these essays and collect them in a book is because I really, something else that was shared with so many readers is that Steve's work, and in this regard, I think the only real comparison is music, is when certain songs came out, when certain albums came out. back in the day, or CDs.
Right.
A lot of people, they form a roadmap for a lot of people's lives. And for me, sometimes it was music, certainly. I still remember that Billy Joel was the first, cassette tape that I bought back in the day. I'm old, folks. And I remember that the first concert I saw was this and that. So yeah, people, they can draw those personal roadmaps with different pinpoints on that map. But that's something I noticed about Stephen King readers, is that so many of them can say, like, I would lead off a conversation saying, yeah, you know what? I remember I was a freshman in college when I was reading that book, and I read it on the bus to a game, and, and somebody will say, oh my God, I had just gotten married. I had read it. I bought it on my honeymoon. And so many constant readers have that experience. And it's just another shared experience that you can only have with certain, people. Certain entertainers. Right. And that's something that again, I realized very quickly, is that made it even more interesting to me, is that it really did, Steve's books, and when I read them and where I read them, did form this really personal roadmap of my life. And I knew already, just through casual conversation, that his books did the same for so many others. So that was another neat thing that you just pointed out in reading these guest essays, is that we learned where a lot of these people were in their lives, and some were happy, some were sad, some were coming off disappointments or tragedies, and it was just a neat thing.
Regarding Bev Vincent, I thought it was just fantastic that he had all that historical tidbits that he included along the way as well. And I'm guessing that, between your obvious fandom as being starting out as a constant reader of Stephen King's to eventually working with him as a publisher, eventually being a friend. And, I know this is the big dream that you never imagined, but it's reality now, of course, having worked with Stephen King on a few different projects. Were there any surprises that Bev included with his historical stuff that you're like, wow, I didn't know that? I'm guessing you probably know almost as Bev does at this point.
And here's the thing, I can't even list one, because it's been a while since I read it. I should have went through it before I got on here with you. But yeah, Bev, I'll always remember there was a blurb, I think, for one of the Dark Tower companion things that Bev wrote, where Steve says essentially, Bev Vincent knows things about the Dark Tower world I don't even know, or that I don't even remember, and that's certainly the same for me. The guy is a deep well of information, and I, as a matter of fact, I remember, and again, I can't remember the exact points, but I do know that on more than one occasion I texted Steve and I said, hey, I never knew this, thanks to Bev, I just found out, that kind of thing. So yeah, absolutely. Bev knows his stuff. Bev's the first guy I turned to when the Gwendy gig happened, and I needed, to make sure that I was writing about Castle Rock properly and characters, and all three books, he was the Robin Firth, was awesome on Final Task. She did so much background, investigation for us. But Bev was my guy on all three.
Cool. He was your tour guide of Castle Rock, and make sure everything's where it's supposed to be.
Yeah,
when you're done playing with
it. He prevented me from looking dumb, which he's done a few times.
Mention this. To Bev is one of the things that I don't really know if I wanted to know that about Stephen King, but I thought it was cool, where there's the one scene or one section of the history of it. I can't remember which book it was now, but he's essentially sitting in his own blood. I guess a recent surgery that decided to rear its ugly head, and he refused to let his wife Tabitha drive him to the hospital because he just had to finish writing that paragraph. And then I think there was this other section as well that you mentioned on, that you were kind of in a similar situation. I'm not sure if it was you had to finish writing something before you got taken off as well. At some point, found it yourself or a similar experience, being sad in a pool of your own blood as well.
I mean, yeah. Well, I was like 2 minutes, getting on this call today, because I was working on a paragraph of I'm doing the edits on Boogeyman, the sequel to Chasing the Boogeyman. And yeah, when you're in it,
Yeah.
I don't understand it to the degree of Steve, obviously, or maybe I do, because when I'm deep into a project, my laptop goes with me everywhere, and including like in a restaurant in case I need to pop it open and write something real quick. But yeah, I mean, there's no comparison. The guy's a marvel. He's 70 something years old. He's still doing his thing. I'll text him and he'll get back an hour later, and I know it's because he was writing. And I hope I'm doing that when, I hope you're doing that. I hope Bev's doing that when we're all in our 70s.
100%. Yeah, I was talking to Joe Lansdale a little while back, and I think it was recently after his 72nd birthday, and he made a claim that he feels like he's in the peak of his writing life right now. And I'm thinking, just if you want to talk about magic moments, I mean, that's just got to be an incredible feat to get to that point where you still feel like you got the engine fired at all cylinders. I think we should all be so lucky.
Yeah, and Joe's another one. Joe's another guy who I don't think Joe's ever waited for the magic to occur or for the inspiration to strike. He's a lunch pail guy who's just, sit your butt in the chair and go to work, and some days it's good stuff and some days not so much. But, it's something I learned from Joe, people like Joe and Ed Gorman and Steve, you just, you pile up enough pages and you eventually have something. And then it's your job to make it better for the readers. So yeah, Joe's always been an inspiration too.
I'm just curious too. I don't know if this is a question that you're aware of or that you, but considering your professional and personal relationship with Stephen King, do you know has he ever mentioned going back as well and rereading any of his books for any reason at all? I mean, I'm sure he's read passages for continuance. He's written sequels and want to make sure that everything's where it's supposed to be in his universe. But do you know if he's ever gone back to reread things to maybe see what he might have thought about that particular book or some books that he may not have remembered as well?
No, you know what? I don't think we've ever had that conversation. We don't talk about the work too much. That's the interesting thing is we're just usually shooting the shit about, other things, but it's a really good question. And it actually makes me want to ask him sometime, hey, did you go back and reread The Shining before you wrote Dr. Sleep, for example, and to see what he thought?
Yeah. Some time ago, I can remember chatting with, late great Jack Ketchum, Dallas Mayor, regarding his movies and watching them every time he tours with them and stuff, the adaptation of his books. And I know he used to think of it as kind of a mental masturbation, and he saw no points in that. But at the same time, that'd be kind of a cool experience, I would think, to go back and reread some stuff. So you've got, decades of writing and such, that Stephen King does, to go back and see what he would think of it now.
Yeah, no, I would actually love to. I would love if he went back and read 3 or 4 novels and then wrote about it and wrote about the his feelings. I think that'd be fascinating.
When you think back of that whole body of work and having reread a lot of them, or maybe even most of them at this point, are there any particular eras or decades of King that you found are kind of your favorite, or is that like asking, which birthday was your favorite of your kids?
Yeah, you know what?
Like it all because it's another one to celebrate, but
yeah, it kind of is like asking that, to be honest. Yeah, I've never been one of those folks who will say, I only like the old stuff, or I really prefer the old Doubleday stuff. Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. Some people are more attracted to the overtly scary stuff, and they're not interested in the stuff that may be a little bit more experimental. Or I was, as I wrote about in Stephen King Revisited, I was one of those guys who wanted nothing to do with Eyes of the Dragon. I wanted nothing to do with the Dark Tower books for a long time because I wasn't into talking trains and weird names, characters, and I've never been that guy, and it took people studying it. And again, I struggled with it because I was always like, Rich, you're a big Western fan, and Rich, you you love, these Mark Twain kind of, adventure stories. So why aren't you reading The Talisman when that's, or The Dark Tower rather, with the Western aspect and
Right.
so, but when I did later and I'm pretty convinced that if I had read them at that point in my life, I probably would not have finished them. But you know
That's
what?
interesting.
I read them later when I was a kind of a different, more experienced, mature reader. And lo and behold, I really enjoyed them. I loved them. But yeah, no, I've never had a preference. I look at it and I'm just like, it's for me, it's always about timing and place, and Gerald's Game and Dolores Claiborne. I liked those books when they came out. I didn't love them, Now I look at those and I'm like, yeah, in a lot of ways, these are two of her stronger books. But I've always been, I've just always kind of worn it on my sleeve. Did I like those early books? Absolutely. As I wrote about some of them, The Shining is such a dark, angry book. It's one, and I actually to the point where I kind of want to go back and reread it sometime. But yeah, I love that book. I think Salem's Lot is still one of the scariest books. Billy, my son, he started to read that book maybe 5 or 6 years ago. You know what? He was too young. I remember he was going very slowly in the beginning. And I remember I said, Billy, you think it's a little slow? I said, because it is kind of dated and there's a lot of setup with the town. And you know what? When you're a busy college guy playing lacrosse, going to class, it just didn't keep his attention. He's read it since then and is blown away. And shares a lot of my own similar feelings, which is just that, it's the town itself and the townsfolk that are every bit as interesting as the scary part of that book. But yeah, I don't really have a favorite era. I would love to actually see like a round robin interview with 20 different authors and readers and see their opinions. Because I think the answers would be all over the place. I think we would have some people saying, man, I don't think he's done anything as good as Hearts in Atlantis. So it was during that 10-year period, that 5-year period where, I really fell in love with his work again. And then there's going to be those people who are still, their favorites are the Doubledays. And then there's going to be people who their favorites are the collections. So they spawn his entire career. But yeah, it's a neat question.
Yep, absolutely. I think that'd be awesome to have could get out of control, but I think it'd also be pretty awesome too, as long as there's not too much alcohol involved. You get like those 20 people together and all chatting about the different books.
Yeah.
And I know, and I love the fact too, Rich, that you, in the books, you not only discuss the books, but also have excerpts from the books in there as well to give folks a sense of the writing style. And I'm getting that because I'm in the same boat as you regarding The Dark Tower. I haven't read it because of the same reasons, exactly the same reasons that you mentioned. But reading some of the excerpts, I think it's just absolutely poetic, beautiful writing. And apparently I've got my work cut out for me now, so I'm gonna have to go and pick up all those books and start reading them.
Yeah, you just be prepared. I mean, when I started, once I got into, book 3, and it all gained momentum. And I remember there was probably a 6-month period, maybe less than that, maybe 3 or 4 months. I don't remember actually, but where I would walk in the front door of the cemetery dance office every day and spew what, oh my God, I can't believe and talking to Brian, so yeah, once you get in, you'll be hooked.
And Rich, I asked this question to Bev Vincent, and I got a surprising answer that I really enjoyed. I'm gonna ask you the same question too, if you don't mind. And just a couple more quick questions here. We'll let you get back to the writing that we're all anticipating reading down the road as well. So thanks again.
My pleasure.
But if God forbid a fire were to break out your house, and we'll assume that you've saved all the, the fur babies and the children and the wife and all the loved ones, and you've got time to run back to grab one possession. You already know my question. One possession out of your king collection. What is it you're grabbing and running with it, and why?
Oh wow. You know what? My answer is my copy of It that I bought back in college, that has since been inscribed and doodled in by Steve. Because if you read Stephen King Revisited and you read my It, Is there an it essay in there? Is that one of the first 19?
Not in this one, I don't believe.
Yeah, no, I've written
I think this comes a little bit after. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. I've written several essays about it, so that's where the confusion is. But yeah, it's a book that pretty much.
Yeah.
I look back at it and I'm like, yeah, that book saved me. It was published in hardcover at a time when I was really lost. I had just finished my lacrosse career in college, and due to injury, and it was it was kind of my identity. I was a student athlete, man. I was a lacrosse player, and that's was what I was doing first and foremost. And that's when that book came out. And reading that book over the course of a couple weeks, I tell people, and I've told Steve this, I told his agent Chuck Burrell, and that's actually how the 25th anniversary edition of it came about. For Cemetery Hands to publish. But I told him, I said, reading it reminded me that of what I was supposed to do, because I felt all these things for the first time back in high school. And then what, you life gets fast, man. You start liking girls, and you start going to parties, playing sports, and you're going to college, and then so things fall in the background a little bit. And I went from being very lost to knowing exactly what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. Within that 2-week period that I read it, and so yeah, my gut says I'd grab my copy of it, but then there's a lot of cool stuff in these drawers and shelves. The marked up copy of with Steve's edits of Gwendy's Magic Feather, that I kept to give to my kids one day, and there's a lot of other cool stuff. So some gifts that Steve has given me and other writers. So yeah, if we're talking about, the Stephen King books, I would grab it.
There you go. And I'm going to guess maybe after this conversation, you're going to put them all into a nice little safe so that way you can just grab that one thing and write it with all of them.
Yeah.
What is it that you're hoping that overall that folks are going to get out of King Revisited? What do you think it's going to mean to everybody that's to both the constant and the new readers to the Kingdom of Cain once they've put down this book, besides wanting to read the next one?
Yeah, I mean, I hope it just starts conversations. I hope they read something, it strikes a chord with them. They read something that I wrote or that Bev wrote about where we were, what we were doing, and what we thought. And they think, oh, no, I was thinking this about that section. Or, yeah, that's a great section. That is a scary scene. But for me, this is always going to be the scariest scene. Those kind of things. It's just, it's just, I hope people who read it kind of feel like I stopped by and talked books for a couple hours and then left. And the conversation's still going with their family or their friends or, reading groups or even they're just inside their heads, they're kind of remembering.
To accomplish with that, I think, because there's a lot of surprises in there. A lot of the books that you talk about, like, for example, Cujo, I would expect you to talk about more horrific aspects of it, which you would think unsurprisingly would be, the part of that book that would stand out. But oftentimes you talk about more of the beautiful aspects of a book and the family dynamics and the coming together of characters and working through those terrifying moments themselves. So I think there's definitely a lot to talk about that I think will surprise people. And if you don't mind, if you've got somebody that's maybe new to King, they haven't read any of his stuff, and they look at this, 40-year career and think, where the hell do I start? What 3 books would you recommend to them to off with Cain? I guess the question for that is, how do we hook them on Cain, Rich?
Oh man, what's interesting is I don't even point to, like my top, like it is my favorite Stephen King book. I wouldn't tell them to read it. It's 1,200 pages. It's it's pretty damn scary, and I know there's a lot of readers out there who don't want the scary stuff. What I'm approached more often is by people who aren't overtly, they're not fans of the scary stories. But they've heard rumblings that Stephen King is just this great storyteller, or they've heard me say it. So yeah, I 11/22/63 is one, even though that's another long one, but I feel like it's just such great storytelling. Hearts in Atlantis is another one that, as long as the person I'm talking to isn't, 18 years old. But even with that said, it's one of Billy's favorite books, and he's a young guy. So, but he is interested in music from different eras and the world. But I still contend that that Hearts of Atlantis is some of his best writing ever, particularly the Hearts of Atlantis novella about the college kids playing cards in their dorm building and the draft and all that's going on in the world. And like I said, 11/22/63. And then, you know what, if I'm just trying to get him with something, a little shorter and punchier, man, that's one where I might hand somebody a Salem's Lot or something like that. But the big one that I've suggested to a lot of people is 11/22/63, because I feel like by the time they get to they're finished, they're not going to know. They're not going to believe that it was a Stephen King book and it didn't have killer clowns or a vampire or so.
Very cool. Once again, I'm surprised by the answer. I wasn't sure what kind of answer I was going to get. I was going to the guy, some beginning, something in the middle, something more recent. But that makes a lot of sense. Well, I'm going to hang up.
I was going to say I'm going to sign off rather and think of three more.
Right.
Like, wait a minute, I forgot about and I can easily turn back here and look. I mean, I could tell a lot of people. My suggestion might be the Bill Hodges books, because again, they're just story. There's nothing, But yeah, I'm looking at my list, I'm one of those people who loves Insomnia, but that's not one I'd suggest. It's a little bit out there. It's a long book. But I love Steve's elderly character. So for me, that's one that's always near the top of my list. Bag of Bones might be one, as long as they're patient, because that's a book that rewards patience, I think. And so, there you go. I'm already going.
Much like Revival.
Revival knocks some people in the dirt.
Yeah. It's got such a long build-up, but then the end of it, I think, is some of his most terrifying stuff with the scene of the ants, and it's just...
Yeah, I think the end...
I guess much scarier.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, awesome. Well, thank you very much, again, for all of your time, Rich. Any final words that you have before we part ways here?
No, just...
the Breed King?
You've asked a bunch of good questions, and like I said, hopefully people will enjoy the book and have some conversations about it and go from there.